So we are here today with CB Gabriel, who is the author of Trey and Kate, a book to be reviewed tomorrow, once this actually gets out on the 3rd. Yes, I can do calendars. That's always fun. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on / have planned for the near future.
Well, I'm an author in Kingston, Ontario, and I've actually written 2 books and several volumes of poetry, but this is my first published book, and I was very fortunate. I met my publisher. She's amazing, and she runs a company called Freaks Fiction, and so this is my first published book, so that's very exciting.
Yeah.
And I do have some ideas for the next book.
Mm-hmm.
The book won't be romance, though. I do know that. It'll be a totally different genre, totally different writing style.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's still in the planning phase right now. It hasn't gotten to the actual writing phase. But
yeah, I'm still curious.
I think it's going to be related to probably World War II.
Oh.
Yeah. But not romance, because I think it's important to try different genres as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
This book that I just finished, it took about, I wrote the first book. I used pieces of the first book to integrate into the second book, as well as like pieces of poetry that I had written before. And it took about 2.5 years to write.
Wow.
Yeah. And it sort of sat there on my computer doing nothing, because I just couldn't get it out there. But I was really fortunate that my publisher, believed in me enough to actually put it out there. So it up since September, and I was very lucky. I went to Indigo, and they agreed to let me come and do a book signing on February 8th. So I'm very excited. I mean, I'm nervous, but I'm also excited too.
I mean, you get to hang out in a bookstore for most of the day.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a pretty busy store too, but they've been pretty supportive. So that's great.
Yeah. So where did this first book, the one that you're signing, Trey and Kate, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're doing? Okay. Where did this come from?
Well, it's not a true story. It has grains of truth. It's mostly based on a collection of my own journey to finding happiness. But I wanted to write a romance story that is a little different than other romance stories. I wanted the characters to be a little more self-aware than you see in a lot of romance. I mean, I think especially in our culture, of masculinity, men are sort of brought up to hold back their emotions. The Trey, he has, without revealing too much information, I mean, he's horribly flawed in his own way, but he's also very aware of his emotions, and afraid to feel them or express them. I mean, it is romance, but I just wanted the characters to be more aware and feel a little more deeply than you see in a lot of romance novels. And so it ties in themes of reincarnation. And, there's a tribute to my favorite poet.
Yes. Always fun.
That was a lot in that book. But I basically just wanted a romance story where the characters feel more deeply than you see in a lot of romance books.
Now, having read the book, I'm going to ask a couple of pointed questions. So this definitely does not feel like a typical romance. It feels more closely related to a literary fiction piece, which is interesting. So how did you manage to do that? Sort of, because following romance tropes usually involves a very regulated set of guidelines.
I actually didn't. You're the first person who has described it as more related to literary fiction. I actually just sort of wrote, I mean, it's a cliche. I can't believe I'm actually going to say this on the air, but I wrote it from the heart, and that's sort of how it just manifested itself. But the poet there are the glimpses of poetry, I guess, that is quite different than you see in most romance novels. And at first I was hesitant about the poetry, but I wanted the poems to sort of represent that these characters, despite, their imperfections, I mean, Trey, he struggles with addiction, and Kate and her own mental illness, they're connected to something greater than themselves. And so I left the poetry in because I think poetry is more expressive than prose in a lot of ways. So and I think the poems guide the chapters. I mean, they're very short, but I think when people read the book, it'll make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that you've also written volumes of poetry.
Yes. They're sitting in my journal. I've never published them. I guess because I never actually planned on writing ever my whole entire life, because I didn't like English class in high school. And
well, I mean, English class and writing books are not the same thing.
They don't tell you that, though.
I know, it's so not fair.
Because I didn't like reading. I hated reading. I had a learning disability that I didn't know about it, which really made reading very difficult for me. And, I think I read maybe one book in 10 years. But it wasn't sort of until I became aware that you can actually choose the books you want to read. You don't have to read the stuff that people tell you should read.
Right.
And that sort of opened me up. But I never planned on writing until one day I just picked up a pen and I just scribbled these poems down in my journal. And most of them aren't even readable, but I just kept them in my journal. I didn't want other people to see them until I started realizing, oh, maybe I can actually use these. And eventually, I think I'd like to publish a volume of poetry, but not until I've written the next book, which will be entirely prose.
Right. Well, writing and publishing poetry is a completely different animal than fiction.
Yeah, no, I'm realizing that. I'm very new to this whole publishing thing. I mean, I would not have been able to even come close to having the confidence to even get my work out if it wasn't for, my incredible publisher, Shauna. She's amazing. And it's just the first step, getting the confidence to get your work out. You have to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Finding those people is always a good thing.
Yeah. No, I was definitely very lucky. And she has her own Facebook page too. I can send you the link, where there's other authors as well, plus her own work. And my book trailer is on that Facebook page. So I will send you that. And she has other book trailers as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's grand. Yeah. So right now you're planning a second book that is not actually related to this first book?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
No, there won't be a sequel in this series. I mean, maybe 10 years down the road, but
sure, I would think it'd be necessary.
No, I think this story is pretty much finished for now. Unless I were to go back and do a second edition, but I'm not planning that anytime soon.
Yeah, well, that's far out in the future.
Definitely.
So as far as the switching between genres, how is that going?
Well, I own another business right now, without getting into too many details. However, I've combined them. For my book signing, I work with animals.
Oh, how fun.
But yeah, so before my book signing, what I actually live right now, people can bid for a gift certificate from my other business. I won't get into too many details right now, because a lot of people listening to this don't live in Kingston, and a book. And all the money goes to the local humane society. So my time is sort of tied up with that at the moment. However, I am planning to write. I actually am. I think the thing with writing, though, I struggled with writer's block after I completed this book, because I was so exhausted. I was so burnt out. I couldn't write anymore. And So I just decided, it's probably for the best to leave it, because I do think it is possible to try too hard.
Yes,
And
oh, absolutely.
and I think a lot of writers will lie and say they don't struggle with writer's block. They do.
It's just a matter of definition.
That's true. But yes, I'm planning on writing again. I am planning, but I think it has to flow. And
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of gotten to a point in my life where I'm writing for myself. And yes, obviously I want people to read my books, of course, but you have to write for yourself first, and not for other people.
Mm-hmm. So as far as the writing process goes, well, from conception of idea to money in the bank, hopefully, do you have a least favorite part?
Do I have a least favorite part?
Uh-huh.
I guess I struggled with a little bit. I was a little disappointed when my book first came out, when some of my own friends and family weren't buying it. That was a little bit disheartening. And sometimes it's disheartening when you get a less than favorable review. But every time you get disappointed or when you have a setback, it's an opportunity to learn. And it doesn't
Right.
always feel that way. But it's, the less than perfect reviews that you learn, because if you can't take criticism, then you won't handle praise as well either. It won't feel as meaningful.
Right.
And then I realized, I'm actually grateful that people would take the time to read my book, because it's actually a lot of work to really sit down and really read a book and give a detailed critique, and then write a review on the internet. I mean, not everyone has the time for that. So yes, I struggled with a bit of perhaps depression with that. But then now my attitude has changed. It's like, wow, people actually care enough to read it, and that's amazing. And it certainly hasn't been a J.K. Rowling thing.
Well, I mean, I think she might be the exception rather than
Yes.
the
No, I know.
touch.
I know.
I
know. I know.
Oh, yeah, we can hope.
Yeah, it's sort of just like a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But I still really respect J.K. Rowling for what she has done, especially for literacy in the planet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are pros and cons to just about, I think, every piece of writing out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nothing is perfect. It's like watching a film. You can get a lot of enjoyment out of a film despite the imperfections you might notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then once you find your tribe, your people, it really does help to have that support structure.
Absolutely. And actually, people have been pretty supportive. I've actually been surprised. On the internet, people are actually pretty supportive. And I definitely wasn't expecting that at all.
Uh-oh.
Well, I've been parts of groups with other things besides writing, and sometimes people can get pretty cliquey. But
Yes.
it's not. I haven't found that as much. Like if you take the time to like and share someone else's page, they will almost always like and share it in return. So I've been pretty lucky with that. That their authors actually do seem pretty supportive, because if we don't have each other, then we would never write.
Well, yes, that's always problematic.
For sure.
Yeah, the world of little bitty author types, I think, is completely different from any other business I've ever been in or around.
Yeah, it's a crazy business. I actually think you actually have to be a little bit insane to be a writer.
Well, naturally.
Definitely, because you have to be. I think I heard a quote once. Oh, who said it? Like, in order to be a writer, you need like a degree of arrogance to think that your words are appropriate, are just important enough that other people can read them. And it made me laugh, because I do.
I like that.
Yeah, I have to find out who actually said it, but I've seen it in other people have written that, in
Mm-hmm.
writers groups, I think it has some truth. And I think you have to be a little bit nuts in order to be willing to take the time out of your day to sit
Mm-hmm.
down, isolate yourself, and somehow translate the words in your mind so that they make sense to other people. I mean, just because something makes sense in your own mind does not mean it's going to come out properly on paper in a
Yeah.
grammatically correct sound way. And writing is difficult. I never realized actually how difficult it really is until I had to stop because I got writer's block, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is actually extremely difficult. And I think we take it for granted because we text throughout the day, we write grocery lists.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really realize just how difficult it is, because there's a huge difference between just writing for daily life and actually coming up with a creative, coherent plot and story.
Yeah, it's definitely not your normal writing activity. Another thing they don't teach you in English class.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, no, I remember those days very well. The symbolism of the tree and this person, like, it's just a tree sometimes.
It's true. It's true. No, and I mean, it's very easily to get so lost in analysis that it almost detracts from the art
Mm-hmm.
itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost takes away from the actual enjoyment of reading. I mean, I know because I've edited work, and just the act of editing something, it's a different perspective than when you're just reading something for enjoyment.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so moving a little bit sideways.
Sure.
Within your genre, I guess I'll add literary fiction to your romance genre there, since I seem to read it that way, but whatever. Is there a book out there that you would very much like to have written, or whose author you'd like to steal their abilities?
Tolkien.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I think every author does. It's obviously not. There are touches of romance in Lord of the Rings. It's
Oh,
fantasy.
absolutely.
I He's a legend. I did see the Tolkien biopic. It was quite good.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking about him because Christopher Tolkien died, unfortunately. I was actually quite
Yeah,
saddened by
that's
that.
very sad. No, I
Yeah.
haven't actually seen the film. Was it good?
Yeah, it was good. There were some historical inaccuracies. I can't remember them off the top of
Well,
my
I mean,
head.
what do you expect?
Yeah, no, I thought it was quite good. And how can you not make a biopic about him? He's a legend.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Oh,
No, but I wish I had written Lord of the Rings to just have that ability to just create those languages. And
the language, the conlangs, my favorite part.
I know, and I I guess just, the spiritual themes in that book. The first time I
Oh,
read it was in high school, and at first when I was just reading it, it was just a fantasy story. But then when I went back and looked at it, there's so much depth,
mm,
incredible depth to that story if you
mhm.
really, really look for it. And what I love so much about that is it's quite hidden.
Mm.
There's a depth to it that you have to look for, and it actually enhances the plot. And that's, I think, what I tried to do with my own book. There are spiritual themes in it, but I didn't want them to be too strident. They're there, there's um, obviously reference to precognitive dreams,
Right.
deja vu, reincarnation, but I didn't want that to be the main focus. But yes, Tolkien, and I like other writers as well, but he was the one that came to mind.
Well, yeah. I mean, I understand that one. And so, as far as your book goes, you do make mention rather a lot of Rumi. Uh,
Yes.
do you have a favorite of his poems?
I no. um, there's just so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
I love some of. I mean, unfortunately, too. they have been, both fortunately and unfortunately, they've been translated so many times that
Yes.
when you're reading an English translation, it will lose some of its original meaning, I think.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, the fact that they've been translated so much makes it more accessible. I never read Rumi till my best friend introduced me to him when about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was just sort of blown away with it, because what makes his poetry so wonderful is he's just describing a feeling. He's not telling people how they should feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just blown away. And so, yes, obviously he's my favorite poet. But I guess I'd never wished that I had written his poetry, because I don't think I would have been capable of doing something like that. I don't think anyone really but him could have been capable of doing that.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Oh, what fun. Yeah, the poetry. I mean, you put poetry of your own into the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Astronomy is also a major passion of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I have a whole bunch of books on astronomy, and there's one book in particular, a little book of coincidence.
Oh.
It's just a little tiny little, those little wooden books,
Uh-huh.
and it just outlines these incredible synchronicities in the solar system. And also, my best friend paints these. I mean, I'm not a painter at all, but she paints these incredible abstract paintings of the solar system, and she's written volumes of poetry based on the solar system. I was just so blown away by it that I felt the need to integrate all those astronomical references into my book,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to show that the characters are, as I've said before, connected to something greater than themselves and what is greater than the universe. Plus,
Right.
I love astronomy so much, I couldn't help but put it in. And
Well, sure.
but the next book won't have any of that. I do know that.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Okay, so you've not told us anything about this next book except that it's historical fiction, World War II-esque. And now
Yeah,
I'm curious.
I think it might be. I'd like to get an interview with a World War II veteran, if possible,
Mm-hmm.
in my own town. It's not always easy to do that, and I'm not sure if it's going to be fiction or whether it's going to be a biography, but it will be related to war, for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that should be quite the journey to take. Wow.
Yeah.
Historical fiction to me is super impressive because of all the research that goes into it.
Well, that's what yes, it is. It's insane. I mean, even writing a biography is difficult because you have to tell someone else's story.
Right.
I really can't. I used parts of myself in this book, but when you're writing someone else's story, you can't use your own experience to really relate to them. It's a totally different ball game.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sort of, do you have any questions specifically about the plot of the book?
Well, I don't want you to spoil anything. That would, I mean, if you can if you want to. I won't complain, but most people like to avoid spoilers.
That's true. I can give you general information, but I can't give you any specifics.
Yeah, we don't want to spoil anything. But that's okay. I will move in a slightly different direction.
Sure.
For people who are trying to get into your genre, what would you recommend that they avoid doing?
Well, I hate to say it, but there is a lot of really cheesy romance.
Really? Huh.
I mean, I never thought I would write romance because a lot of it is really cheesy and not relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Because romance is not always easy and fun the way they make it look like in a lot of those, romantic comedies from the 80s.
Mm. Oh, man.
I think it's best to approach, anytime you want to read romance, approach it with an open mind,
Mm-hmm.
and be aware that there are romance books that actually are realistic and do reflect real life. And they're not just fake Valentine's Day fluff. That makes sense. And I really tried to avoid that as much as possible in
Mm-hmm.
the book. I wanted the characters to be realistic. That's why it's contemporary, and they struggle. They do struggle, both of them, with their own lives, and that's why they struggle with each other. Real relationships, people get divorced and they get back together. They
Mm-hmm.
fight. Even though they love each other deeply, they still question it. I mean, life is messy, and sometimes relationships aren't even our priority because we get so wrapped up in jobs or illness. And I think it's very easy to forget that, because a lot of romance makes it look like, oh, romance is fun and easy. And it's always like that in the beginning. I mean, new love is very, very exciting and fun. I mean, when I met my boyfriend, well, it was kind of like being on cocaine for 6 straight months.
Wow.
But that obviously faded. And even though, we're not posting on Facebook constantly that we're together anymore, it's deeper now, even
Mm-hmm.
though we have other priorities, and we don't always appreciate each other as much as we should.
Mm-hmm.
But the love is deeper, even though it's more subdued, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Oh, no, absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
So then the next question would be, for all of the slightly cheesy, fluffy romance out there, what place does that have?
Well, everybody likes reality TV. I guess it's kind of in everybody has guilty pleasures too, which is fine. I have guilty pleasures. I won't tell you what they are. And maybe, we all need a good fantasy, all of us. And
Sure.
we all need something light and fun, especially when life is scary. So there's nothing wrong, really, with cheesy. I mean, okay, I get annoyed by it sometimes, but in the grand scheme of things, there's nothing really wrong with cheesy romance. I think as long as people are aware that there are romance books that are deeper than that, and explore themes that, like mental illness, which
Mm-hmm.
does show up in my book.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's just, there's cheesy romance, which is like fun fluff, and then there's romance that actually has a lot of heartfelt pain in it too. So I
Yeah.
had to do that myself.
Just depends on what you're looking for. If you want, reality, or if you want escapism, I suppose.
Exactly. And they can be both.
Oh, yeah.
I think even in modern day life, again, it's a cliche, but having
There's a reason why we have cliches.
having romance gives us something to believe in. I actually just ordered a book yesterday. I haven't read it yet because it hasn't arrived in the mail. Love Letters from the Great War, sorry. And I was just reading some excerpts the other day of these incredible love letters that, people would write to each other during World War I, and
Mm-hmm.
they blew me away. I was just so blown away by how articulate and how
Mm-hmm.
eloquent these people were. Some of them weren't even particularly well educated in a formal sense, but they were really saying what they really meant to each
Mm-hmm.
other. And it blew me away, and it inspired me. And there was a quote, like, they represent that, love can transcend. People can believe in love even in something as horrific and as awful as war. And obviously, I'm very fortunate. I don't live in a circumstance like that, but
Right.
it can give you something to believe in. And these are real letters too.
Oh,
So I'm
absolutely.
looking forward to reading it when it arrives in the mail.
I love getting new books.
Yeah, can't always afford it.
No, but there's just something about that new book smell.
I know. I do want to get Kindle Unlimited eventually. That is something I've been meaning to do. I didn't even know it even existed, actually, until my publisher put my book up on Kindle Unlimited. It's free on Kindle Unlimited. Like, wow, this is like Netflix for books. This is awesome.
Yeah, it is wonderful, I have to admit. I use it all the time.
Yeah, and I think it will actually help because, like everybody else in the modern world, I'm on my cell phone pretty much. I'm on my cell phone way more than I should be. So, Kindle Unlimited is great. I think it's actually helped increase literacy. It helped people reading because you can just read on the bus on your phone.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
So yes, I am hoping to, again, on the list of things to do. That's one of them. As well as get my glasses fixed and get a new laptop so I can write better.
Oh, well, I mean, you don't need to see. Who needs to see?
You don't need to see. No.
No. Yeah, no. As someone who has to wear glasses every day, I understand that one.
Yeah. I do write by hand, though. I do.
Wow.
There were parts of the book that I wrote entirely by hand before I went and typed it on the computer. Not all of it, but some of it definitely was, because I find cursive writing can actually enhance the flow of creativity. I mean, it's a different style than just going and typing on the computer right away.
Right. Yeah.
And because, my writing, when I'm writing in my journal in cursive writing, I'm not so concerned sort of with how other people will see it, because that's the first step.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit more flow to it.
Oh, so, interesting.
Yeah.
Do you find that you write faster when you're doing cursive? Because I know sometimes typing, you can actually keep up with your brain.
It really depends on the day.
Yeah, I know that one.
Because I saw a quote on one of my fiction writing groups. I was like, people are saying, why is writing difficult? It's like, well, because there's cat videos on YouTube.
So true.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, there's, puppy videos. I watch puppy videos.
Yeah, those are fun.
So sometimes actually writing by hand, I can keep up with my brain more because I don't have the distractions. But you're right, typing, definitely, I am a faster typer than I am a faster writer, which I think is common in our modern day society.
I think so. I think, yeah, that's, do they even teach cursive anymore in schools?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't have children, so.
I don't either. I just remember it being taught to me in primary school, and then I don't know if the younger generation knows how to write cursive anymore, which means they don't know how to read cursive.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, I don't know. I was fortunate that I did learn, and I actually really like cursive writing. I actually took calligraphy in grade 8. We were that old-fashioned. I had the calligraphy pen, and I'm pretty rusty at it now, but I loved it because, like, you wanted to get the letters under the line. You wanted to touch exactly the line.
Right.
Yes.
Calligraphy is a whole form of art that I absolutely love and cannot replicate.
Well, it's so old-fashioned, and that's what I love about it. And maybe that's where you got the idea of literary fiction. I actually have gotten some feedbacks on my book. It's like, well, you kind of write like you're in the 19th century a little bit. It's like, yeah, maybe it is a little old-fashioned without meaning to, but maybe it's because I took calligraphy in grade 8. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows where these things come from?
For sure.
Yeah, well, is there anything else you'd like to add that is book related, writing related, or not at all related to anything we've talked about thus far?
Well, I do have a promotion going right now on my Facebook page. If anyone, my author page, the 1,000th person to like the page, as long as you're from Canada and the States, will get a free personally signed copy of my book. I'll mail it to you. I'm getting close. I'm almost at like 920 likes now, so I'm not far away. And I have author support Sunday, every Sunday. And on Sundays, even if I don't always post it. On Sundays, it's a free-for-all on my page. Post your books. This is my personal page, not my author page.
Sure.
And if you live in Kingston, Ontario, and you are interested in my auction, it's on Bidding Owl, and I can send you the link itself, and I will announce the winner at the end of my book signing. So, and it's for a good cause. It all goes to the local Humane Society, and I know they need a lot of support.
Absolutely. Well, it has been absolutely fantastic talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Thank you, and I look forward to your review of my book,
which will be out on the 4th.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, and good luck with your own writing too.
Oh, thank you. That's always a process.
Definitely.